You guys were on.
We can't see ourselves right now. The flyer is still up. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Russell Tomlinson, and welcome to Relationship Revolution Television. It is so good to have you, and I am excited about what's going to take place on this particular program because I have my dream guest and my dream girl, Dr. N. Cindy Trimm Tomlinson. It is so good to have you on our very first inaugural broadcast of Relationship Revolution Television, and I could not ask for a better, beautiful guest. How are you doing?
On top of the world, still rising, making waves that other people ride to the top.
Well, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's why I'm excited to have you because a whole lot of people are getting ready to ride to the top just based on the subject that we're going to talk about because we're dealing with tonight the significance of relationship structure. And that's very important because structure is where things get established and things get built. And so when we go into this particular subject, there's going to be some empowerment. In fact, you are an empowerment specialist. Not only that, you are a thought leader, an influencer. You are an author of a whole lot of best selling books. And the list of your accomplishments go on and on. You are a speaker that's demanded all over the world. People are always excited to see you and always excited to hear from you. And I am more excited than all of them because I get to spend this time with you, empowering those that are watching right now. And so, with all of that said, I want to just go through this because we only have a few precious minutes, and I want to get everything out of this particular broadcast that I can. And so, when we talk about the significance of relationship structure, there are things that I think, in a lot of cases, people just miss. Uh, the significance of it, again, is about building. And I want to ask you, why is structure for a healthy, functional relationship so important?
Firstly, you can't get away from the topic of relationship. Um, uh, I've discovered over years when people ask to talk to me, they're asking to talk to me because they're struggling in three main areas. Number
Mhm.
one, either their health. Number two, they're struggling in their mental space, their mind, their finances. And here's the fourth space, they're struggling in their relationships. So
Yeah.
people want to know how to fix their mind, how to fix their bodies, their lives. They want to feel better all around. They want to feel better about themselves, about their finances, and about their relationships. I find that everything rises and falls on a relationship. And if you're casual with your relationships,
Mhm.
then your life is going to be a casualty.
Absolutely. Well, the thing that I always say is that relationships give rise or fall to every
Mhm,
life. It
mhm.
depends on who we relate and how we relate to people.
Yeah.
And so, how would you define structure as far as a relationship is concerned?
Well, I think structure, if you look at how a house is built, it's built based on structure. Structure dictates
Hmm.
functionality.
Hmm.
And you cannot function effectively in life if you don't bring structure to your relationship. It's
Hmm.
like building a house. And the foundation of all of our progress, success, and prosperity is built on relationships. There's nothing actually in the universe that operates outside of a relationship. It's a fragile, we live in this fragile ecosystem. And I'm sure you've heard of the butterfly effect, that the fluttering of a butterfly's wings in California affects the wind flow in Calcutta. And so, likewise, with relationships, we have to be able to use relationships like a person drives a car. And
Mhm.
I call relationship the differential power. And anyone knows about cars, you navigate with, through the terrain and weather, as well as the roads and the surfaces of the roads, because of a differential. And that allows the wheels to turn independent of one another so that you can navigate a turn. You don't want the whole four wheels turning at the same time. You're going to end up crashing. And so relationship structures are like the differential in a car, that they're interrelated, but they should be operating interdependent but independent of one another. In other
Mm.
words, you need the four wheels, but you need them to operate interdependently, but also perform independently. So when it comes to relationships and the structure of a relationship, you've got to be able to put people in their place. Which relationship should they be in? So there's a structure that we call parenting, where you have a father, a mother, or a father or a mother, um, relating with a child. That relationship with that child is different from the relationship that the father and mother would have with one another. And then if you look at the relationship structures, then once the father and mother goes to work, or they might be a homemaker in the home, a stay at home parent, because we used to have stay at home mothers. Now we have stay at home fathers, stay at home parents. But if one goes out to work or both goes out to work, there's a different relationship structure that you're looking at for their professional life. And
Mhm.
then there's a structure for relating with their siblings, or there's a structure that you use to relate with a stranger or an employee or an employer, and so on and so forth. So you've got these structures between people, and then you've got structures, organizational structures, and then you've got how we relate to the world. We've heard of social responsibility, charity, humanitarian acts, and all of that stuff. But that's how we relate to the big social structure. And that is a structure in and of itself. So
Yeah.
everything has a structure, everything in the world, from plants to atom. We can't see the atom, but atoms have structures, just a
Yeah.
intergalactic structure. So you cannot get away from structures.
Yeah.
So as we are looking at the world as a big interrelated ecosystem, each thing having a structure, then it would reason, any reasonable person would conclude that a relationship or relationships have to have structures as well.
Yeah. Would you agree then that having definition and boundary lines is a part or the beginning part of structure for any relationship?
Yeah, it dictates to it. So, I believe that relationships function more effectively if there are boundaries. And you say, okay, why do you need boundaries? Boundaries is tantamount to mental and emotional health.
Mhm.
Even if you travel in the United States of America or any country, if you go from state to state, there are boundary lines. And this is how you differentiate one state from another. And likewise with countries, they dictate how you operate in a state, how you operate in a country, what you
Mhm.
can expect, what is expected from you. So when you have boundaries, you're actually protecting your emotional and mental well-being. If you have no boundaries, then you open yourself up to dysfunction, and you open yourself up to codependent relationships. You want to make sure that your relationships are mutually beneficial.
Mhm.
And relationships, I think, are transactional. So if they're transactional, then you're going to have rules. You're going to have boundaries. Where do I end and you begin? And this is important. We're not just talking about physical boundaries. We're talking about emotional boundaries,
Mm.
financial boundaries. We're talking about personal boundaries. So there has to be boundaries in any relationship, and that's an integral part of the structure that we talk about.
Absolutely. And I was also thinking when you were talking, I was thinking about the idea of definition. So many relationships are established on personal relationships are established on emotional connections. And anytime you just have an emotional connection and there is no working definition of that relationship, well, the emotions can go in and out, up and down. And then before you know it, you've got a tumultuous kind of situation because nobody has actually given definition to it. And when you don't give definition to that relationship, it's really hard to know even how you keep certain boundaries because the definition part is missing. For instance, uh, if I'm going to have a wife, and thank God I do, well, I've got to be able to define what a wife is to me. And then you, on the other hand, you have to define who you are as a wife. Then when we come together, we work out the definition, and then we can establish those boundary lines that you were talking about.
Yeah, another way to say that is, what do we call this?
Yeah.
Because that helps people to manage expectations. We all know, we talk about organizational abuse.
Hmm.
I think the definitions, even in terms of your work relationships, a lot of people go on the job
Yeah.
expecting to be liked. You're not there for a Mr. or Mrs. Congeniality competition. You're
Yeah.
there to work. Your boss isn't, it doesn't have to like you. Your coworkers don't have to like you, because a lot of times we we violate boundaries. Even in
Hmm.
the workplace relationship, those boundaries are violated when we go to work expecting people to be our friends.
Yeah.
And so those boundaries are important, and expectations are important too. I mean, clearly defining what the expectations are. If you haven't defined the relationship, it's difficult then to regulate expectations. And this is where you go into the whole topic of emotional health and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, a simple way of looking at emotional intelligence, is the ability to regulate your emotions.
Hmm.
So you can not only manage it, but regulate it. And the infamous slap in the face, without calling names, the infamous slap in the face is an example of someone who did not have emotional intelligence. Now, you can't say that they weren't intelligent. You cannot say they weren't gifted. You can't say that they were not likable, that they didn't have social skills and social graces. They had all of that. I think the challenge with that situation, that whole scenario, is that they lack emotional intelligence. And again, emotional intelligence is the ability to regulate your emotions. It's not denying it, but regulating and manage it. And if the relationship has not been defined, then you're going to have problems in that area, because then it's going to be difficult to manage expectations,
Wow.
manage your expectations of one another, what to expect out of that relationship. And it's just going to be a casualty, because some of the greatest joys come out of relationship, but some of the greatest sadness and some of the greatest pain comes from relationships. And unless we're clear on the nature of our relationship, the definition of the relationship, what do we call this, in other words, simple way, then we're not going to be able to manage the expectations. And then, you throw the boundaries into the mix, and it lends itself to dysfunctional relationships altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I can appreciate what you just said. And one of the things that I think we need to probably look at is helping people. And I've got a question that I'm going to ask you, helping people to understand these things that we're talking about as far as structure is concerned. Because if there is no structure, then things are all over the place. If there is no pattern, if there is no system in place, then there's nothing to regulate the the forwardness of the relationship or the progress of the relationship. You don't know really where you are because of this lack of structure. And there's so many people that struggle with the idea of structure. And I think that's why, I'm just going to touch it and leave it alone. But I think that's why living together, without the benefit of marriage can be problematic because, there's no structure there that says, you need to position yourself to be this and that and do this. And before you
Yeah,
know it, you
yeah.
got a volatile situation.
Like the movie said, friends with benefits.
There you go.
So what again, if this is a friendship, then I'm not expecting certain behaviors within a friendship. But if it's something else, then let's call it what it is. Again, using this as an example, what do we
Mhm.
call this? What do we call this? I think, every graduating a student that's matriculating from high school could really benefit from a lesson, from a course in relationship. Because after you graduate from high school and you go into adulthood, it's never too late, but you could have avoided a lot of the pain if we had just brought definition to our relationships. And I just said, call it like this: put people in their place.
Yeah.
So if this is a work relationship, then let's put them in that structure. If it is friendships, let's put it in that structure. If it is employee employer, let's put it in that structure. If it's mother and father to child, let's call it what it is. And when we are able to call it what it is, we're able to then clearly define what our roles are.
Yeah.
And if I know what the roles are, I would know what my responsibilities are. If I know what my responsibilities are, I can establish really clear boundaries. If I establish real clear boundaries, then I can help to manage your expectations and then properly manage mine. And, a lot of people are disappointed. A lot of people are hurt because in their mind, they have a relationship that doesn't really exist. So a lot of
Mhm.
people end up really hurt and disappointed in life with pain that could have been avoided, especially as adults. Now we expect children not to be definitive. They don't have, the intellectual building blocks. They just want to have fun. But in adulthood, life is not just fun. You can have fun uh, doing life, but then if you have this relationship, it's a transactional.
Mm.
You want something from me, I want something from you, but the structure is going to dictate it. Um, or the structure is going to dictate whether or not I have the right to expect that. I was thinking, as I was preparing for tonight, um, back in the day, I had a number of houses in my portfolio and a number of pieces of property. And I hired a contractor and I wanted to do something. I wanted to build another level on top of this house. And the contractor rolled out the architectural plans and the house was fine. The living space was fine. Then they went upstairs and they built another part on the existing structure. But
Mhm.
the original architectural rendition dictated a certain foundation to carry the weight of the home.
Yeah.
But when he went up and he put floors and he put ceilings and he put windows, then the load, the existing structure could not handle the load.
Mm-hmm.
And little by little, the extra weight began to throw everything off. The windows were cracking, the floors were moving, the
Yeah.
doors, couldn't close properly because the original structure was not designed to carry that load, to carry
Mm.
that weight. And this is why, when we talk about relationship structures, we can keep adding things onto relationship structures that were not designed to carry that load. And, for instance, even in our friendships, a lot of times we try to make friends family. They may feel like family, but the structure that we originally engaged in was called friendship.
That's right.
So we have to cut a clear boundary. I often say I usually don't engage in business, or I don't enter a business engagement with friends because the original structure cannot cannot carry that extra load. So if I go into business with a friend, then I have to decide transactionally whether this is going to be a friendship or whether this is going to be a business. So when it comes to boundaries, here's my boundary. Number one, never engage a friend in a business relationship. And if I do, then I have to give up one of those relationships. I
Yeah.
have to give up the friendship, and then I have to call this new transactional relationship a business partnership.
Yeah.
And then one of my rules, I own several businesses, so one of my rules is never to have hire family. I made some exceptions to it, and I remember one of my family members that I hired, I began to treat him like an employee. So
Yeah.
when we used to get to family gatherings, they would pull me aside to try to talk business. Why did you treat me that way? I'm your family member. And I said, listen, as long as you are an employee, I'm going to treat you this way. But when we get to family gathering, we are not talking about business. Here's my
Hmm.
boundary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, you can talk to me as your boss. But after 5 o'clock and family gatherings, you cannot address me as your boss. I'm your sister or I'm your auntie. And
Yeah.
so that's the boundary that we draw there.
Yeah.
And, I can give many, many other examples, but structure dictates functionality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a major key word, because what we want is function. We don't want dysfunction in a relationship. So you have to begin with structure. Let me just also throw this in. There are people that go on jobs, and the structure on the job is not actually established to go there and meet a life partner or a husband or a wife. And many times when that happens, I'll say this: a job or your place of employment is not the best place to find a soulmate. If you stay within the guidelines, the boundaries of what that job calls for, and keep it professional, you won't have much of a problem. But what happens when you start dating or you're interested in someone, you meet on the job, maybe you eventually get married? What happens when there's some kind of conflict going on?
Hmm.
You got to go to work with the same person. And
Hmm.
so there are all kind of things that can hinder the process and the progress of a relationship, all because we lack structure. And where
Hmm.
there is no structure, there is no function, but rather you're going to have dysfunction. Can I ask you a question here? Because I think you've been successfully single, and I mean that in every sense of the word, successfully single. And then, of course, we were married. It was all in Newsweek magazine. You were married at 60. I was 60, so, and all of that. And so, what does relationship structure look like for someone who is single?
Well, we're relating. You cannot get away from relationships. And even if a person is a hermit, they have to relate to themselves. They have to relate to nature. So I think a healthy relationship with other people starts with a healthy relationship with yourself. To thy
Hmm.
own self be true. You cannot demand from someone else what you do not demand of yourself. So if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, you can never expect to have a healthy relationship with others. We end up projecting our insecurities, our feelings, our emotions onto someone else. And of course, we believe the stories we tell ourselves. So I think, self mastery is key to successful relationships. Self mastery is key to recognizing, developing, and honoring relationship structures. And if, self mastery starts with self knowledge, self awareness, and it ends with self actualization. And that in between stuff is, of course, self care and self promotion. And you can keep going on with the self and self approval.
Hmm.
Some people don't approve of themselves. They doubt themselves, they hate themselves, they second guess themselves. And that is often projected onto other relationships. So I think healthy relationships start with the healthy relationship that we have with ourselves. The
Yeah.
big question is not whether people love you, do you love yourself? The big
Yeah.
question is not whether people like you, but do you like yourself? Do you like to be with yourself? Do you like your thoughts? Do you know what you like? Do you know your opinion? Do you have an opinion? What's your perspective on life?
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to show up whole. It's not a 50-50, it's 100%, 100%. And the second thing about a relationship is not there to make you happy. You can get enjoyment together,
Yeah.
you can enjoy one another's company, but no one is there to make you happy. You've got to bring your own happiness to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Happiness is not even in the vows. Better
Hmm.
or worse, rich or poor,
Hmm.
sickness and in health, till death us do part.
And
But
it's killing some people to stay together.
well,
That's the funny
marriage,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
marriage is always going to be a challenge because you have two different individuals, and one of the things that I encourage people to do is never lose your identity because you're married. I
Hmm.
think the strength of our marriage is that you're good at being yourself. I'm
Hmm.
good at being me. And when we put our differences together, we
Hmm.
go to a deeper place as far as our relationship is concerned. And I think one of the things that has happened to so many people is that they lose their identity and somehow they have this wrong concept of what it means to be one. It doesn't mean that you're no longer separate. It actually means when you're one to have a mindset and you're on the same page as far as the direction that you're moving in.
Hmm.
But oneness does not mean that you just stop being who you are and try to somehow conform to who your spouse wants you to be. That's where success begins. Yeah, we're two different people with different ideas, different ways of doing things, different thoughts.
Hmm.
But the beauty is, we know how to take our differences and be diplomatic and still be in love.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, absolutely. I think, relationships are so important. Again, I mean, some of the greatest joys we have in life is because of relationships.
Absolutely.
The greatest challenges are because of relationships. I also honestly believe that relationships are mirrors
Hmm.
that are given to us. They're actual gifts. The good things and the bad things and the challenging things, they're mirrors for us. And we see ourselves in the behaviors of other people. We identify. A relationship to me is a beautiful journey of souls.
Yeah.
And we talk about, soul mates. But when there's this the two individuals that are coming together to relate, whether it is, husband and wife, friends, mother, father, child, whether it's in the workplace where you're relating with your colleagues or you're relating with your superior or we're relating with nature. The
Hmm.
beautiful thing is relationships are there for us to grow, to progress, to prosper, and to succeed in life. And you do that through relationships.
That's good. That's real good. You know, we can get so caught up in the difficulties of life that we fail to understand that there's a destiny awaiting us, even though we have some difficult times.
Hmm.
And I've discovered that many times people miss destiny because they don't have structure for that relationship to take them in that direction. And so I want to just for a few seconds at least ask you, what are the benefits of relationship structure? Because
Wow.
when you get all caught up in, and that's why I don't want to come on, especially at this time, reminding people we're in hard times, we're in hardships, we're in difficult times. Everybody, I think, knows that by now, especially after the bout with COVID. But what we don't want, and the reason we're talking about this subject is because everybody that's listening, they have a destiny. And the difficulties can blind people of that destiny. And so I'm going to ask you to share some benefits of relationship structure.
Well,
What?
when you have structure, again, I'm thinking of boundaries. So maybe I'll isolate the word boundary. A relationship structure includes boundaries,
Right.
and boundaries, help you within a relationship
Hmm.
to keep yourself at the center of that relationship so that you're not living on the boundary of a relationship when you should be in the center. In other words, to help to prioritize yourself within that
Hmm.
relationship and not make yourself not live on the, I don't know, outskirts of a relationship, and treat yourself with respect. Relationships become should become a safe space. So
Yeah.
it becomes safer, and it provides more conducive environments for you to thrive in when you understand and respect your partner's boundaries and help them to respect yours. It becomes a safer space for the two of you to have this relationship. And then the third thing, these structures do as it relates to boundaries, it helps you to live with a higher sense of self esteem because you recognize that your self esteem is not coming from outside of you, it's coming from within inside of you. So, with healthy boundaries in place in a relationship, all parties can have a sense of belonging and thus a sense of being wanted and celebrated and affirmed. And that is a real self-esteem booster.
Hmm.
So, and then it helps you to keep balance, to keep balance in your life. When you know where you end and someone else begins, then your entire personality is not wrapped around someone else's personality. It's interwoven into you, but your string is different from theirs, or
Yeah.
where your string stops and theirs starts. And then when we talk about boundaries, rather than just saying, okay, you need these healthy boundaries, but we're talking about physical boundaries. So this is an integral part of structure. When there's a certain boundary that can be crossed if you're in an intimate relationship with your spouse, and another kind of private boundary that can be crossed
Mhm.
if you're, say, within a family structure.
Yeah.
But then when you're in the workplace, there are certain physical boundaries that have to be established and they have to be respected. And this is why now there's sexual harassment laws that is put into place to protect people's personal boundaries. And that takes me to the next, the sexual boundaries in a relationships.
Yeah.
You know, you have to make sure that they're healthy
Yeah.
and acceptable, and know what is unacceptable, as far as sexual intimacy. The sexual intimacy that a husband and wife experiences should not be taken outside of the marriage. So you have those kinds of boundaries that has to be agreed upon, has to be respected, and cannot be violated. Then
That's
there's intellectual boundaries in a relationship as well. We all grow up, we all have been socialized, maybe in different environments, but intellectual boundaries speaks about ideas and concepts and mindsets and perceptions that each one of us have. And it actually has been formed as a result of our socialization and education and our relationship constellations. And they vary. They vary from person to person.
hmm
I think this is what makes, an intimate relationship, or even relationships with friends, exciting, because you get a chance to understand other people's perspective and maybe walk a mile in someone else's shoe. Then
Yeah.
there are financial boundaries. And this is huge. This is huge. This is a huge conversation. I think that we should park this one aside and really talk about financial boundaries as well.
hmm
Amongst adult family members, siblings, the boundaries between parents and children, the boundaries between friends, the boundaries, between a colleague. What kind of financial boundaries do you have? And they should be honored, and they should be respected as well. I mean, just because two people are friends and have been friends for 1,000 years doesn't mean that you have to give them and loan money. I have a rule of thumb. If I can't give it, I'm not going to loan it. I'm not a bank.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's my rule of thumb. And that has kept me out of a lot of hot water, not backing someone up in a loan.
Yeah.
I was watching a movie the other day, and it was hilarious, where someone gave their truck as collateral to get their cousin out of jail, and they were close growing up. And then the cousin skipped bail, and the husband and wife is coming out to get into their Tahoe, and they had someone that was clamping it and putting it on a tow truck. And they said, hold on 1 minute, we own that truck, we don't owe it to any bank. And they said, well, you should have thought about that when you bailed your cousin out. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
those kinds of boundaries, financial boundaries. And then there are, personal and emotional boundary. I grew up in a small family, and in a very, very small home with 8 people living in this tiny, tiny little house. And we had to have a lot of personal boundaries and a
hmm
lot of emotional boundaries. We had to
Yeah.
have it because we were, cramped in a small space. So this is my drawer, and it is not our drawer, it's my drawer.
Fine.
This
Yeah.
is my shoes. And if you want to use space in my drawer, or if you want to borrow my shoes, you have to respect my personal boundaries by asking me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand, when we talk about these personal boundaries, we also talk about emotional boundaries as well, how someone interacts, how someone honors, how someone respects. How do you allow a person just to talk to you in that manner? You've got to establish very clear boundaries. And if
hmm
something is hurting you, or if you need something clarified, then you've
hmm
got to be able to communicate that. And then finally, big boundary. And I'm finished with all my boundaries and structures after that. But I think one of the things that is important is time boundary.
hmm Yeah.
And that's why structure is important,
Absolutely.
because the further out the structure moves from you, who happens to be the center, you having a relationship with yourself, determines how much time you give to people.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's something that I teach in my coaching sessions, and it's called treatment training.
Hmm.
What people sometimes people fail to understand that you have to train
Hmm.
the people that you are relating to how
Hmm.
you want to be treated.
Hmm.
And there are people that have a problem with that because they accept anything that anybody brings their way. And, treatment training starts, if you are dating, it starts there. If you're a friend, it starts there. But if
Hmm.
you don't place an
Hmm.
emphasis on showing people how you want to be treated,
Hmm.
you'll find yourself saying, well, it doesn't matter. I don't care. It doesn't make a difference. And at the
Hmm.
same time, it becomes frustrating and aggravating because you really want to go in another direction. You want to do something else, but
Hmm.
you don't have the nerve to explain or at least say, this is what I want. This is how
Hmm.
I want to be treated. And if you don't express it, you're
Hmm.
going to be treated any kind of way. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
treatment training is major. Let me
Hmm.
ask you this question, and we're just about ready to wrap it up. You have so many best-selling books out there.
Hmm.
What resources would you recommend for those desiring to have a better structure for their relationships?
40-day soul fast.
That's the one.
The 40-day soul fast. I will highly recommend that. This book is a life changer. We talk about living authentically.
Hmm.
But nobody tells us the characteristics of living authentically. So the 40-day soul fast is not about what you're eating, it's about what's eating you. And a lot of things that are eating at us are relationship oriented. So it's not, this is not about you giving up food, but you discovering who you are so that you could put people in their proper place in your
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. And putting people in their place. You're not talking about necessarily telling them off, but you're talking about structuring
Yep.
people in a position
Mm-hmm.
where there are mutual benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you see any examples of relationship structure in the way Jesus ordered his relationships?
Absolutely. I mean, if you read the book of John, that's all about relationships. I mean, he's the relationship guru. How he entreated people and talked to people and was moved empathically. He interacted from his heart and not from his head. He moved through this world with authenticity, and having personal integrity and living authentically doesn't mean that everyone is going to like you, because most people are bound by society and cultural and controlled by cultural algorithms. So when you find freedom within yourself, you're able to move freely through life.
Hmm.
But usually the people that are bound in their own life will not like the freedom that you have. But you got to be free anyway. That's number one. Because he loved himself and he had a relationship with his creator, with God himself, then it was easy for him to relate to others, understand others. I think he was a behavior guru. Why do people do the things they do?
Yeah,
And I highly recommend also the DISC assessment tool. It's something that I use in my mentorship program,
yeah.
where you're either a DII, a C, or S. And this is especially important for leaders, people that are leading. And we're all influencers, but everyone that's in a relationship should, number one, know their temperament and know their personality and know how they operate, but also understand that people have different temperaments as well. And so that's another assessment or tool that I would highly recommend anyone who is relating with anyone else in this world to do
Hmm.
to do the DISC assessment.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very, very powerful tool, by the way. Well, look, So structure, and I'm just going to briefly summarize, structure is akin to arrangement and order. And what I've discovered, and others have also, that God moves in order. So when we structure our relationships, we're putting people and even places in order. And then God can have influence in those relationships. He can give you clear direction, He can give you clear instruction, He will give you real discernment because order is where God allows His Spirit to work. So, a structured relationship is actually inviting the power of God, the Spirit of God, the blessing of God on that relationship. So, if we're going to prosper in any area of relating, we've got to have this thing called structure. You know, you are the most well-developed person that I have ever met. I am so proud to be married to you. You know, it's such a privilege, it's such an honor. I mean, it has been a journey, and we'll have our fifth year in next year sometimes, and we're going to do something really, really exciting. But I'll tell you this much: this has been the greatest adventure of my life. And I appreciate and love you so very much. And I want to take time just to say thank you for being with me now. Periodically we do things together. Cindy Trimm Ministry has been around for a long time, highly successful. And of course, at this particular time, I am doing something that's totally different from what you're doing. However, it is such a joy to come together with you every now and then, and we do these kinds of things. And of course, I'm certainly going to be calling on you again because I've got structure, strategy, security. What does a submission look like? That's a big deal nowadays. Submission. People have a total misunderstanding of that. And then, of course, we'll look at what does a successful relationship look like. So I've got a variety of guests that's going to be coming on, but you are by far my number one favorite guest of all time. So thank you again, sweetheart. I appreciate, we're just taking time to get together and influence people's lives for the better. So everybody out there, if you have something in the chat box, why don't you just go ahead and send us a virtual applause uh, for my beautiful wife, Dr. N. Cindy Trimm Tomlinson. We've gone over time. We're 10 minutes over. All right, so I've got to go ahead and close out. But let me just at least give you guys some things that I want to remind you of. Of course, you see it right there on the screen. 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My personal development classes are going for this month, and we're looking at taking them over to next month also. You got to join me on Monday for personal development. Of course, on Tuesdays, I'm on Clubhouse, and then Thursdays, I'm right here on Relationship Revolution Television. And just in case you're interested in my coaching services or even the coaching services and mentoring services of my wife, you can contact me by way of, well, you see it right there, email. It's going across the screen. And also, with that said, I am excited about your future and your future relationships. Now, it would be remiss of me if I did not give the givers an opportunity to give. Now, of course, nobody is ever persuaded or forced to give, but I think that there are people out there that recognize the value of what they just heard from my wife, Dr. Trimm Tomlinson. And I even put my 2 cents in there. That's what you call a double portion blessing. So if you know yourself to be a giver, I'm going to ask you, and we've got it right there. Go to my Cash App if you have Cash App. And there are other giving venues that we're also going to have in the near future. This is our very first Relationship Revolution television broadcast, and we've got more to come. But I want you to support what you are seeing and hearing, because by doing so, you are actually helping us to get this good news out to the rest of the world. And I believe that there are blessings and increase and prosperity coming your way as a result of being a not just a giver, a cheerful giver. So it's right there on the screen. So if you desire to give, we have given you at least one avenue right now so that you can do so. And I want to thank you in advance for your giving. And also, I want to encourage you to have a spirit of expectation. You've heard this scripture, I'm sure, that not only does God love a cheerful giver, but Paul wrote that he shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory. When he wrote that, he was talking about the people that gave into his particular ministry. Well, that's what we're asking you to do. And if you are so impressed to do so, we will not only receive it, but we will stand with you in faith and keep you in our prayers. So thank you so very, very much for being with us. Listen, God bless. We are out. I'll see you back here next Thursday, 9 o'clock. And we've got another powerful guest coming to be with us as we look at these relationship issues and help you to revolutionize every relationship that you are connected to. God bless. You all have a great night. Thank you again, sweetheart.
Thanks for having me. Night, y'all.